Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just get my volume topped up here. Testing, yep. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 10:11 p.m. It's the 15th of April. Middle of April already. Tonight I'm just going to talk about some stuff, pull back from the big macrocosm picture, the spiritual journalism as I've taken to calling it, and just talk about life, my life, your life, the time we live in. Try to find some connectivity between us, some shared compassion for this life, for this moment, for each other. So I'm going to try and tell you something now, and I'm going to use my own life and my own experience as the basis. We were created to be independent beings. The amount that has been invested in human beings is extraordinary. Don't let anybody tell you different. And part of the UFO narrative is to make us feel inferior too. I don't care who it is. Alex Collier, Billy Meyer. Certainly that's the case with Stephen Greer. Puny human. You know, is what the Hulk used to say in Marvel Comics. Puny humans. It's this non-stop derision. This non-stop defilement of the human. It has crept into our culture so quietly and so insidiously. There's a lot of things tied to it. Climate change is a big part of it. Stupid human, you've ruined the planet. What about Bambi? What about the deer in the woods? What about the beavers? What about the fox? What about all the things we're taking with us, you selfish human being? And you got the religions, you know. Although you've heard me, I'm just going to speak freely tonight. I mean, I do every night, but usually when I say something like that, I'm just going to speak freely. It's because I'm about to say something which I think some people will be offended by, and I'm okay with that. The entire construction of the Catholic religion was to demoralize us, to prevent us from sharing and talking about our own spirituality. Because how could it be anything? Jesus was the Son of God, don't you know? Born of a virgin. Now, don't get me wrong. Big fan of the Gospels. Great teacher of the human race, Christ. I don't want to get off on the wrong foot right at the beginning of the podcast. But the Son of God and the perfect unsinned man sacrificed at the age of 33 is a story told to make us feel stupid. And a story told to make us angry. and a story told to keep us from forming our own spiritual communion with each other and celebrating our own gifts and our own divinity. How can you have a divinity? You're not the Son of God. You're just a worthless sinner that had to be saved. It's a contemptible story in the hands of the Vatican. Not the life of the Christ. Separate the two. The words of whomever wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I don't believe that could be faked. I don't believe that's a psyop. It's too spiritually perfect, the words, and the unyielding commitment to unconditional love, and the absolute maintenance of the transcendent consciousness throughout his mission. Right? So I don't believe this Amon Hillman nonsense either. That's the guy the classicist, the guy who can translate ancient Greek, going around and saying that, Christ was in the park in Gethsemane with a 14-year-old boy. I don't for a moment believe that the Christ was involved in chemical spirituality. Remember, material, chemical, transcendent. Transcendent is when you go into pure energy and you don't need chemicals to do it. You don't need ibogaine. You don't need ayahuasca. You don't need ritual. You don't need ceremonial magic. It is achieved by practicing the art of stillness on a daily basis for however long it takes you to begin to experience it. And that's different for everybody. Some people can experience it very quickly, which probably means they did a bunch of training in a previous life. Remember, you carry the spiritual stuff forward. Other people can meditate every day for 20 years and not experience anything. It's not guaranteed. But the person who meditates for 20 years and doesn't experience anything, I can fairly well assure you that they've worked off a lot of karma that would have spilled into their timeline in the form of misfortune or disease or other things. There's never a downside to meditation. There's never a downside to being quiet. There's never a downside to studying your interior, especially with the intent to know the divine. And the divine is the life-giving force, that which sustains the living membrane, or, if you will, the membranes we live within. It's very beautiful. So as a socio-political tool, the life of Christ has been a torturous thing in the hands of the Catholics. Okay? What a shameful thing to do, to say you can't save yourself, that you can't become transcendent by your own work, that only the grace of the Christ can lift you out of it. That's not to disparage the people who've accepted the grace of the Christ and found wisdom and universal compassion and connectivity, and I suspect the Holy Spirit as well. There's nothing wrong with that. If the gift was laid down and you accept the gift, then good for you. But I'm talking about the propagation of a doctrine here. I've spent so much time shitting on the Sanhedrin, I have forgotten to take proper aim at the Vatican. And perhaps it's time for me to correct that mistake. And the theology of Christianity is just completely fucked. It's just absolutely fucked. Which brings me to the more personal aspect of tonight's podcast. My car is being repaired now, and this was long overdue. The starter was, we had to push it to get it started. There was something about the electrical connection. And it was no doubt a result of my brother-in-law using it to go up and down the mountain anywhere from 2 to 4 times a day. Total abuse of my generosity. So today he came and worked for 3 hours. I've been back from Panama since March 2nd. My shower and extra bathroom at the front are not done yet. And so far, all he did was lay the concrete pad, which was 3 hours work, and he did that about 5 weeks ago. Then another day he came and he framed it, and now he has started to put the wood up. But he's not done. He worked about 3 hours today. In total, he hasn't worked more than 2 complete days on my project. Now, this is a very touchy subject in my marriage. It has been up until now. But I asked my wife today, why did Stephen only work 3 hours? And she said, well, he had to go and try to find some money to buy food. There's no food in his house. And I had told my wife that he could not ask for an advance because he's already about $2,000 US in debt to me because of bailing him out on his child support, and already I've bought him food in the past. And I've reached the end of my tolerance for this guy, especially when he showed up drunk to pick Rosemary and I up when we got back from Panama. I mean, how much am I supposed to take? But here's the thing. When you live in a small community like I do, the karma of others kind of spills into your life. Now, I've been a lone wolf most of my life, and you can easily be a lone wolf living in big cities of 7.5 million people like the greater Toronto area or the greater Chicago area or the greater New York area. You can just disappear. It's funny because in a big city, you can be more alone than you can in a small mountain village. And this is not something I would have known had I not come here. This is something that I had to learn by experience. Now, in my meditations, I've been told repeatedly to continue to assist without complaint this brother-in-law. And I am certain of this because it's been underlined 2 or 3 times. But I'm human. And I argue with God sometimes. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, the guy worked 3 hours today. I've been waiting. We're waiting for the next big project is Bob's house. Now, I told my wife some time ago that I don't like working with Stephen, my brother-in-law. And she asked why. And I said he has a curse on him. And my wife, in her infinite wisdom, or lack thereof, said that's nonsense. She said, what do you mean a curse? I said, everything he touches turns to shit. That's a curse. Okay? Before I go any further in this story, I want to make clear why I'm telling it. As the vice gets tightened on this moment in our timeline, each and every one of you listening to me is going to have your own version of Stephen in your life. It's going to become a very common experience because a lot of people have just been putting it up until now. You know, like that old timer at the gas station at the beginning of No Country for Old Men. He says, call it, heads or tails. He says, well, I need to know what we're calling here. He says, everything, Anton Chigurh. Well, what do you mean, everything? I got nothing to put up. And Anton Chigurh says, yes, you do. You've been putting it up your whole life. Basically calling the guy out on living a completely useless life. And in some ways, he was probably spiritually correct to do that. That's the role of the negative, the dark force. It challenges people when they get too comfortable. Anyways, the guy flips the coin and he wins. And then he immediately has Chigurh's respect because he took the chance and he won. And fate decided. But he had been putting it up his whole life. So now I'm locked in this situation where the work I need to get done can't get done because I told Stephen he can't borrow any more money and he has no money to eat, and without food he can't work. And there's no welfare over here. You guys got to understand, those of you listening to me in the first world, most of the world has no welfare. Okay, there was none in Taiwan. There's very little in Southeast Asia. There's no welfare in Malaysia. There's no government money. Maybe a disability pension if you're like a police officer and you get wounded on the job or something. Most cultures take care of police. But for the most part, there's nothing like welfare, food stamps. There's no situation in Costa Rica where you can do nothing and get money. So you fall, you fall. And this is why family is so tight over here. Okay? Now what happens is you get people who come along and they abuse the family. So from my perspective as an outsider, the last guy to marry into this family of the 11 original children, I'm looking at this and I'm going, what the fuck is going on here? Like, why do they put up with this guy? You know? I received no such grace in my upbringing. No forgiveness like that. I was thrown to the street at 16. And so it's very difficult for me to comprehend this continued support, this continued compassion for their brother. I suppose you could say I'm perhaps being a little bit obtuse, that part of me does understand it, It's just that, I don't know, maybe I've taken in too much of the dark side, I don't know. Right? I've spent a lot of time in the dark stuff. Not as a participant, but just the way spirit unfolded me, I moved through the dark stuff. And the dark stuff teaches you a lot. In fact, I don't think you can speak publicly with any authority about spiritual matters unless you understand the dark side. You understand? Because it's all part of the same creator. Now, I'm not advocating anybody go out and initiate into a left-hand path and start studying magic or any of this stuff. I think everything I want you to know about the darkness is in the books, and you don't need to know any more than that. But I know what Stephen needs. And if I were to do it, I would be a monster up here. I would be Hannibal Lecter. Right? I think he needs to be cut off, which would involve him losing another family, because his woman would leave him. If he can't support her and keep food on the table, she'd leave. And that might push him, that's his make or break point. He's either going to spiral out of control from that point on and kill himself before he's 40, or he's going to, as they say in the 12-step programs, he's going to hit rock bottom and come back. And it's always a gamble. Like, you never know for sure which way it's going to go. But the guy is literally a curse. So we now need food, okay? Now, because I waited so long to take the car away from him because he had no other way to get the children to school, because they got to go down the mountain, and then they got to catch a bus, and they got to go to the high school, which is about 20-25 minutes down the road on the highway. Now, he's got it worked out. There's only one child going to the high school, and they found somebody to contract with who takes her all the way to the high school. by motorcycle for about $15 a day. And then picks her up and brings her back at night. I don't think this guy takes her all the way to the school. I think he just takes her to the base of the mountain where you catch a bus. And there's a school bus. There is a school bus. The base of the mountain is about 7.5 kilometers. It would take you about, it takes me about 90 minutes to walk it. Hour 15, hour 30. Some of the younger guys can do it in an hour. But I waited to take the car away from him because I really wanted to be as supportive as I could. And it was hard after he showed up drunk when we got back from Panama. And then he's been drinking even more now. I think he's off of it now, but it's just unbelievable to watch this shit go down. People author their own misfortunes and then scream about some third-party force doing them in, like the devil or, bad luck or some bullshit like this. But if you study any circumstance closely enough, it's always the people that do it to themselves. And when you're young, the mechanics of consequence move more slowly because you have a natural grace when you're young. But they're working. They're functioning. And you will meet your consequence at some point. So, now we've entered into the biggest holiday of the Costa Rican and, quite frankly, the Latin American year. So everybody has different holidays, right? I don't know what the big one still is in North America. Probably the most days you get off for work is Christmas. Okay. Although it's probably the same as Easter. But over here they call Easter Holy Week, Semana Santa. And it's pretty much the whole week. Now, the stores are open, but the mechanic isn't fixing the car because it's Semana Santa. And his relatives have come from all over Costa Rica, and he's not that involved in it. And we're out of food now, and I got to go to town tomorrow and get food, and I'll have to take a cab. Now, a cab costs 30,000 colones, which is about $60. I got to pay $60 because my brother-in-law, the first time I'm leaving the mountain in like 2 weeks, because my fucking idiot of a brother-in-law broke my car, can't repair it, and now it's trickling over into my timeline. And I'm out $60 to get a cab to go to the grocery store, and I'm probably going to have to buy that fucking idiot food too. And I'll do it because Spirit told me to do it. But as a human being, as a personality, I'm not fucking happy about this. At all. So what is a curse? Now imagine me trying to explain all of this in a second language like Spanish. I mean, these things are complicated enough in my mother tongue. It takes a certain amount of artistry and dexterity with language to make the subtlety of the points understood. Okay, so what is a curse? A curse is when you come into the space of somebody else, their vibration, their energy, and their consequence spills into your life when you try to help them. I got my bronze when I was 16. There's 2 levels of lifeguarding. The first one, and I think is universal, but it might just be Canada. The first level is called the bronze, and you're allowed to be an assistant lifeguard. So if you're at a big public pool with 300 or 400 people in the pool, you can be a lifeguard. And there'll be a main lifeguard. And the main lifeguard has what's called the national certification. And there's a big process you have to go through to get this. You have to swim X number of laps in a certain amount of time. It's pretty quick, too. You have to swim every stroke. You have to demonstrate you're an expert swimmer. So I took this course when I was like 15, and I got my my bronze lifeguarding certificate. And I always remember something that they taught us in the training. And it's this. When you're in water over your head, do not make skin-to-skin contact with a drowning person. They will drown you. They will pull you under the water, push you under the water to stand on your shoulders to try and stay alive. And it's not even them doing it. It's that body consciousness I speak about. Okay, so you could look at every realm of the human existence. Every one of the membranes has its own consciousness. Now, when you achieve transcendent consciousness, you begin to, in a sense, diminish the lower consciousness, the consciousness of the body, the consciousness of the astral body, the consciousness even of the causal body where your karma is stored. Transcendence begins to erode those things. And eventually you'll be released from the bondage of all those things, and you will live in a permanent state of transcendence. I probably won't achieve that. I might, but I probably won't achieve that in this lifetime. Okay? It's very difficult to do unless you go and you live in a monastery or you live in some form of dedicated and life-centered spiritual path. But for a guy living in the world, taking care of a family and writing books and making a living, I'm doing very, very well as a lay spiritual journeyman. Very well. But anyways, the body consciousness will take over. And it will just take over the rationality of the person. So you're not dealing with a murderer. The drowning person is not a murderer. They have no control over their actions. Their body is just saying, if I go under this water, I will drown. And anything they can do to stop from going under the water, they'll do, including pushing somebody else under the water. A drowning person would do that to their own mother. That's what I was taught. And it's true. That's why when you watch Baywatch and all that stuff, they never go out into the surf without the buoy behind them. And they have this harness over their shoulder, they swim out, and they have this red plastic flotation device, and they hand that to the drowning person, and the drowning person grabs it, and the lifeguard swims them back to beach. And usually when you're at a public beach and you get into a drowning situation, it's usually because you got dragged out by riptides. It happens all the time over here. About 10 or 12 people die a year in Costa Rica as a result of riptides. They're really something, I'm telling you, really something. To get caught in one. So Stephen is my drowning man. And he's starting to pull me under. Okay? I don't think he can drown me. But his maldición is what you call a curse. A blessing is a bendición. Bendición. Maldición. His curse is seeping into my life. And now he could be helped, but it would require a tremendous amount of intimacy. And quite frankly, the thing that prevents it the most is false pride. I will say this, I have spent hours and hours talking up the virtues of the campesino, which is Spanish for peasant. They have a tremendous amount of virtues. Okay? But they also have consciousness vice. Now, body vice is body vice. It's tobacco, liquor, drugs, sex, vice. Consciousness vice is false fronts you put up because you don't have the humility to admit you need help. And I have to say, these people here, they have this false pride in spades. Okay? It is, so how do you help somebody who's cursed if they don't have the humility to admit that they're cursed? Or even be led through a process where they could see it themselves? Okay? I'm not sure I have an answer to that. But I'm going to do what Spirit told me to do. Because Spirit is always smarter than me. It's the superintelligence behind all intelligences. And what's probably going to have to happen is I'm going to have to take over Stephen's whole life. So he's not going to come anywhere close to paying off what he owes me just based on this bathroom and shower he's building. The wood might be $400. Yeah, I'd say $400 US for the wood. Remember, his debt with me now is about $2,000 US. The wood might be $400 and the labor might be $200. So that's another $1,400 he has to work off. And the whole time he's working, he has to be fed. And the 5 children he's taken on, he used to just have one living with him. Plus he has the child support for the children who don't live with him, who happen to be my favorite nephews. Okay? Favorite nephews. So he's got a child support there that is, I think, $300 US a month. He's basically fucked. He's basically royally fucked himself. Okay? And the false pride is the pretense that he can go along pretending he can manage his life. So I ask you, dear listeners of the Talamanca Review, what would you do in a situation like this? How would you remedy a situation like this? So he's going to have to work for me for about 2 months. He's probably going to have to, all the labor he will do, and there's a lot of welding to be done on Bob's house because I'm going to do a steel frame cob house. I'm going to document all this, by the way, so anybody who is thinking of maybe coming up here, buying a lot and building a house, even if you're not here 12 months a year, you're going to see the kind of house you'll get and how I build it, and I'm pretty sure I can build these houses for like $30K, right? Nicely done too, like nicely done. So he's probably going to have to work for 2 months, and all I'm going to do is buy the food for him and the kids at the house. And that's the only way he can pay me back. Now, when we were going to Panama and he got arrested, there was no way I could get the money to the police station. The closest I could have gotten the money to the police station would have been about 5 days. And I would have had to go home and get the bank details of the social services office that accepts child support payments, and get all their bank details and do a wire transfer from my Canadian bank, which would have taken 5 days. So the way Stephen avoided jail was my wife called a farmer who works up here and has a farm up here, but he doesn't live here. He's actually quite well off. He owns a couple hotels in Puerto Viejo. Really nice beach town. But he has a farm here, and he produces a lot of the food that he uses in the restaurants of the hotels he owns. So he just recently opened up, and this is ironic given the price of eggs in the United States, but he opened up an egg business, and he's got a big chicken house, and he's got about 1,000 chickens. And generally a chicken will lay an egg a day. So that's 1,000 eggs a day. And he has a truck that comes up, and all the eggs get scooped up and taken out, and they get taken. He keeps cows there, and the cows get milked. And I'm not sure what else he's got there. But my wife called him, and he came. Very nice guy. Name is Juan Carlos. He came to the police station. We had already left because we had to catch the bus to go to San Jose because our plane was leaving the next day. And my son was with me too because he was catching his plane the next day as well and going back to Canada. But Juan Carlos went to the police station and he paid the money, which was $1,480 US. And he paid that money on the promise that I would pay him back as soon as I got back from Panama. I got back from Panama, I came home, I logged onto my computer, my wife got his bank details, and I transferred the money. And he was very happy. But he said this to my wife. He said, "Rosemary, don't ever do this to me again. The way this was handled, I feel like I had a gun to my head." And he gave me the perfect language to express my position. And so that's what I said to my wife. I said, "Look, I feel like I've had a gun to my head now for like a few years. Every project I go to do, you insist I use Stephen, that we keep the money in the family. I can't put an ad or call some people who built the original house with my son to come up here. And I could have a work crew come up here and, have 4 guys live in my house and work every day, all day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. And they'd love to come up here and work. And I follow the tradition of this culture, which is you stick with your family. But this fucking cunt, Stephen, he just abuses it. Right? He just abuses it. And so now he's at his wit's end. And I'm not sure whether I should let him off the hook or not, or I should let him collapse completely and lose the family. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to do here. Everybody has a Stephen in their family. Everybody has a Stephen in their life. And what's going to happen now is every one of us is going to be taxed. Because this is what happens when systems collapse. The people who were barely holding on to begin with, they become liabilities. You know the story about the nomadic North American Indians? Especially the Canadian ones? We learned this in high school in Canada. When they had to move in winter, if somebody in the tribe was too old and they couldn't make the journey, they would leave the person on an island And they would leave a little bit of food with the old man or the old woman. And there would be no shelter on that island, no cabin, no teepee, no nothing. And they would just go on the island. And the person who took them out to the island would come back, paddle by canoe across the river or the lake again, rejoin the tribe, and the tribe would begin their migration, however long it was, 100, 200, 300, 400 kilometers of walking over 2 months or longer, all with these huge packs on their back, carrying all of their possessions, meager as they may be, and all of their portable living accommodations, the teepees and stuff to set up every day after a day of walking. And the old person who couldn't make it, they were left on the island. And when the winter came, and the winter would be very short, not a whole lot of time to wait, they would freeze to death. And that was considered in the native culture the most peaceful way to go. There's no pain when you freeze to death. When the freezing actually starts, you actually feel warm. And then you just kind of you fall asleep, and you just never wake up. You freeze. And so we haven't experienced anything like this in a long time. I'd say, not for 100 years anyways. Not since about 1925. Or was it? I don't know my U.S. politics that well. Was it Franklin Delano Roosevelt who brought in the New Deal? At least since World War II, since 1945, there has been no hard decision ever needed. And this is why Trump is so shocking. People are calling this fascism. It's not fascism. He's doing his very best to save an economy which, had it kept going on its trajectory under the Democrats, it would have slowly died anyways, and much more painfully. So we're all kind of up on this moment now. Whether you look at it through the lens of my brother-in-law, Stephen, or you look at it through the lens of the weaknesses in your own family, or you go back to the beginning of the podcast where I explained to you that there's no welfare in other parts of the world. The North American and Western European experience has been one of leisure and comfort for 75 years now. From 1950 to 2025. 75 years of leisure and comfort. The baby boomers, they absolutely got it better than anybody. Okay? The baby boomers. And there's all these people now expecting their entitlements, their food stamps, their welfare. Certain cultures in rich countries have formed around this liberal weakness, in which for generations people will breed without ever working. I assure you this goes on nowhere else in the world. In most parts of the world to this day, if you can't feed your children, they starve. How long's it been since that kind of reality has graced us? I tell you honestly, I've lived this way my whole life. Since the age of about 14, knowing I'd be kicked out. From 16 when I got kicked out. This is my normal. I'd say I've mastered it up here with the Earthbag House. But my normal is most people's nightmare. And it's almost on us now. And it's not just the material aspect of it, like Stephen's inability to support himself, or the old people in the native analogy I gave you. This is going to be hitting you mentally as well, and spiritually. There's a lot of people out there who've been spiritually bothered for years, but nobody ever noticed because no stress was put on them. A little bit of stress and the demon will come out. What we're going into now is biblical. It's a reckoning. I would strongly suggest you find yourself in a very safe place. For those of you who might think I'm being a bit dramatic tonight, let me assure you, I'm probably being understated. I know what people do when they're desperate. I've lived on the streets. I know how crazy people get. My journey has been one of trying to maintain the love and respect of my wife, while quietly, without getting angry or aggressive about it. And I think Spirit told me to support my brother-in-law unconditionally, so that my wife could see what I see. Because if every time I'm asked to help somebody and I get all pissy about it, I just seem like a selfish, egotistical prick. Here's this Canadian guy who comes to our mountain, makes more money than anyone else on the mountain, except for maybe Juan Carlos, the hotel owner. And he gets all pissy when we ask for a couple $100. Well, I didn't get pissy. And that couple $100 turned out, then it went to $500, then it went to $1,000, and it just keeps going. So at some point, you have to nip it in the bud. At some point, you have to paddle to the island and leave the person on it. There's no other way. And the podcast I've done tonight is really about the insanity of liberalism to begin with. There will never, ever be a world in which people don't have to take care of themselves. And if there is, they will all go crazy. They will go stark, raving mad. Because taking care of yourself is the beginning of all spiritual understanding in this dimension. That's why an economy was put here. When you look at the reality we live in, never for a moment think anything here is accidental. It isn't. It has been measured to the millimeter. And whatever measurement goes below a millimeter, I don't know what that is. You'd have to get an electron microscope. It has been measured down to the smallest particle. It's a living, breathing membrane that is the outgoing breath of a creator, where breath is a metaphor. And that means everything we encounter here has spiritual purpose and meaning. And the fact that we see it any other way in 2025, and that we put it through the lens of an AOC, or Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, or any of these radically leftist morons, and throw Bernie Sanders into the mix as well. He's a fucking idiot. Look at what happens in communist societies. And China's not really a communist society. China is a capitalist society run by authoritarians. It's not a communist society. If it was a communist society, nobody would get a passport and nobody would be allowed to leave because the state invested in you when it put you through the public schools. Does anybody remember the term Iron Curtain? It's not a communist society. When you look at the real communist societies that have come up, like North Korea and the Soviet Union, everybody goes crazy. And they go crazy because the rule of self-responsibility and accountability for self as a living consciousness and a living body and an incarnation is compromised. And that's a basic fundamental part of being a spiritual being. Now, Karl Marx knew this, if not consciously, unconsciously, governed by the demon that possessed him. And that's why he developed it. You see? Where else are you going to get insights like this? Where else but the Talamanca Review, I ask you in all honesty? But somehow liberalism has crawled on its hands and knees right up until 2025. And if you look at the people most in favor of this excessive liberalism, they're these baby boomer fucks like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these fucking idiots who grew up when it was inconceivable that somebody could starve. And maybe their position was valid in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even halfway through the 90s. Let me ask you this. How do you think it's possible that we could have a lower standard of living 30 years after winning the Cold War than we did all the way through the Cold War? So we had to have all that money to fight the Soviet Union, to maintain complex, comprehensive spy outfits. All of this money we put into submarines, aircraft carriers, fighter jets. And even with all that added expense of the higher military budget, we still had a better economy on a per capita basis all through the Cold War than we have since the Cold War ended. I'll tell you why. Because shortly after that, liberalism became a complete scam. And all of them are just looting. It's looting now. Now they're starting, both in Europe and in the United States, they're starting to look into these multi-billion-dollar green funds. And they're finding that nothing's been done with the money, and all of this money has disappeared. Liberals. That's good enough for tonight. Liberals, what are you going to do? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.